There is a part of you that you have never met. It has been with you your entire life. It shapes your reactions, your judgments, your impulses, and your fears. And you have spent most of your life making sure you never have to look at it directly. Carl Jung called it the shadow. And he believed it was the most important thing about you that you refuse to acknowledge. This video is about what it is, where it comes from, how it controls you without your awareness, and what happens if you never face it. There is a part of you that you have never met. It has been with you your entire life. It shapes your reactions, your judgments, your impulses, and your fears. And you have spent most of your life making sure you never have to look at it directly. Carl Jung called it the shadow. And he believed it was the most important thing about you that you refuse to acknowledge. This video is about what it is, where it comes from, how it controls you without your awareness, and what happens if you never face it. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist who spent his life trying to understand why human beings behave the way they do. He was one of the first people to seriously study the unconscious mind, not as a place where forgotten memories go, but as an active force that shapes your personality, your decisions, and your relationships in real time. Jung believed that most human suffering comes not from the world outside, but from the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. He spent decades developing a framework for understanding the hidden structure of the human psyche. And at the center of that framework was the shadow. Not as a metaphor, as a real psychological structure that every human being carries. The shadow is not your evil side. That is the most common misunderstanding about Jung's work, and it leads people to dismiss the idea before they have understood it. The shadow is everything you have decided you are not, every trait, impulse, emotion, and desire that you have concluded is unacceptable, either to yourself or to the people around you, gets pushed out of your conscious awareness. It does not disappear, it moves into the shadow. This includes the obvious things: anger, jealousy, greed, cruelty. But it also includes things that are not negative at all. Ambition that felt dangerous to express, desires that felt shameful, strengths that made other people uncomfortable, parts of your personality that were criticized or ignored when you were young. All of it gets pushed down, all of it becomes shadow. And here is what Jung understood that most people still struggle to accept. The shadow does not weaken when you suppress it, it grows. The shadow begins forming in childhood, not because something went wrong, because socialization requires it. When you are young, you learn very quickly which parts of yourself are acceptable and which are not. You learn this from your parents, from your teachers, from other children, from the culture around you. A child who expresses anger and gets punished learns that anger is dangerous. A child who is ambitious and gets called arrogant learns that ambition is shameful. A child who is sensitive and gets told to toughen up learns that vulnerability is weakness. None of these lessons have to be dramatic. They do not require abuse or trauma. They only require repetition. And over time, the child builds a self, what Jung called the persona, that presents the acceptable version of who they are to the world. Everything else gets pushed into the shadow. By the time you are an adult, you have been doing this for decades. You have a carefully constructed identity that you present to the world, and underneath it, a shadow that has been accumulating everything that identity had to reject in order to exist. This is where it gets uncomfortable, because the shadow does not stay silent just because you refuse to look at it. It influences your behavior constantly. You just do not recognize it as coming from you. It shows up in overreactions. When something triggers a response in you that is far larger than the situation seems to warrant, that intensity is almost always the shadow. Someone makes a comment about your work, and you feel a rage that is out of proportion to what was said. That rage is not really about the comment. It is about something in your shadow that the comment activated. It shows up in patterns you cannot explain. You keep ending up in the same kinds of relationships. You keep making the same kinds of mistakes. You keep being drawn to situations that damage you. These patterns feel like bad luck from the outside. From the inside, they feel inexplicable. But they are not random. They are being driven by parts of yourself that you have never examined. And it shows up in your judgments of other people. This is the most important one, and we will come back to it in a moment. Jung identified a mechanism he called projection. Projection is what happens when you cannot acknowledge a quality in yourself, so you perceive it as existing in other people instead. The qualities that provoke the strongest reactions in you, the behaviors in other people that make you most angry, most disgusted, most contemptuous, are almost always reflections of your own shadow. This is not comfortable to hear, but think about it carefully. The person who reacts with extreme rage to dishonesty in others is often concealing their own capacity for deception. The person who is most vocal about other people's arrogance is often suppressing their own desire for recognition. The person who judges others most harshly for their weakness is often most afraid of their own vulnerability. You see in others what you cannot see in yourself, and the intensity of your reaction tells you exactly where your shadow is. Jung put it simply: everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, not as a comfortable idea, as a direct instruction. The next time someone provokes a strong negative reaction in you, the most useful question you can ask is not what is wrong with them. It is, what is this showing me about myself? Jung was direct about this. He believed that the refusal to face the shadow was one of the primary causes of human suffering, destructive relationships, and collective violence. On an individual level, an unexamined shadow does not just sit quietly. It takes control in moments of stress, fatigue, or emotional intensity. It drives compulsions and addictions, not as moral failures, but as attempts to suppress what is trying to surface. It creates a gap between who you think you are and how you actually behave. And that gap generates enormous psychological tension. People who have a large, unacknowledged shadow often feel a constant sense of something being wrong that they cannot name. They feel like they are performing their life rather than living it. They feel alienated from themselves without understanding why. On a larger scale, Jung observed that what individuals refuse to acknowledge in themselves, they project onto groups, nations, and enemies. The most dangerous people in history, in his view, were not the ones who embraced their darkness. They were the ones who were completely convinced of their own goodness, because they had projected everything they could not acknowledge about themselves onto someone else, and called it evil. Jung did not believe the goal was to eliminate the shadow. He believed the goal was to integrate it. Integration does not mean acting on every impulse you have suppressed. It means becoming conscious of what is in the shadow, so that it no longer operates without your awareness. It means looking at your overreactions and asking what they are telling you about yourself. It means noticing your projections and using them as information rather than certainty. It means being willing to hold the parts of yourself you have rejected long enough to understand where they came from and what they need. This process is not comfortable. Jung was explicit about that. He called it the most difficult work a human being can do, because it requires you to abandon the identity you have built, the version of yourself that you have been presenting to the world, and encounter what is actually there underneath it. Most people never do this, not because they are incapable, because they are afraid of what they will find. Here is what Jung believed, and what the evidence of human behavior seems to support. You are not who you think you are. The self you experience consciously is a partial construction, a curated version of a much larger and more complex reality. The parts of you that you have rejected did not cease to exist because you rejected them. They went underground, and they have been shaping your life from there ever since. The shadow is not something that happens to broken people. It is something that happens to all people. It is the inevitable result of becoming socialized, of learning to function in a world that requires you to suppress parts of yourself to be accepted. The question Jung spent his life asking is not whether you have a shadow. You do. The question is whether you will spend your life being controlled by something you refuse to look at, or whether you will turn toward it. Not to destroy it, but to understand it. Because the things you most need to know about yourself are almost never in the parts of yourself you are comfortable with. They are in the parts you have been avoiding, and they have been waiting for you to look. Most people spend their entire lives building and defending an identity, protecting the image of who they believe themselves to be, and never asking what the cost of that protection actually is. Jung's answer was clear. The cost is everything you could have been, if you had been willing to face what you were running from. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the part of you that has been waiting the longest to be understood. And once you begin to see it clearly, something shifts. Not immediately, not completely, but enough. You stop being surprised by your own reactions. You stop seeing your worst qualities only in other people. You stop performing a version of yourself that requires constant maintenance. And you begin to encounter, for perhaps the first time, something closer to who you actually are. That process never fully ends, but it begins the moment you are willing to ask the question Jung spent his life asking. What is it that I refuse to see about myself? And what would change if I did?